Hey, alright, so today we're going to talk about tuning your car with springs and anti-roll bars. If you get it right, put the hard work in, you will get this. It's a nice bowling trophy that says champion in front. Okay. And if you get it wrong, your setup is not so good, and you will still get something. You'll get something like this, your participation medal. Thank you for participating. Okay. Now, these are both mine, so I've been there. I've been here. But I would prefer here. Okay, so today let me share with you how you can use springs and anti-roll bar tuning to go faster and become better. I'd prefer to be fast than last. Okay, so first thing is, what are springs? Alright, these are springs, okay? And these are my Tamiya springs. I've done lots of Tamiya racing. I've organized it from short and soft springs to long and hard springs. Makes it easier for me to choose. Okay? And what are anti-roll bars, stabilizer bars? These wires, these things that you put here, it helps control the roll. Those are what you call anti-roll bar. I prefer stabilizer bar. I use them to make my car feel more stable. So I like it. I like using it. Okay. Before we guess, I'd like to take guesswork out of tuning. There's so many springs to choose from. Testing them all is just going to be painful, time-consuming, not practical. So let's start with theory, philosophy. What's my philosophy? My philosophy is a soft suspension makes the car easier to drive. Whereas a hard suspension makes the car, if it's too hard of a suspension, it makes the car harder to drive. It feels more reactive. And so the extremes are there. So softer to an extent makes it easier. Harder to an extent makes it fast, but more difficult to drive. And if you exceed the range, if you go too hard on the suspension, too stiff, the car is hard to predict. Meaning, if it will spin out, it will spin out quickly. If it will understeer, it will understeer suddenly. You would not have time to react and correct. Conversely, if it's too soft, the car is too slow to react to your inputs, and you will have a hard time making it obey to your commands. Especially if you have chicanes, the car is still rolling here, whereas you want to go here, your car wants to go there because the suspension is too slow to react to your inputs. And so the way is, you have to find a well-balanced setup. Probably not too hard and not too soft. And that should give you the best performance. That's my philosophy. And all things equal, I will lean towards a softer car because it's more gentle on the tires and more forgiving over bumpy tracks and corners that have plow discs. You can ride over them. Stiffer car will bounce your car off the corner and heat up your tires more. Okay, so here we have. Let me share with you now that the philosophy is out of the way. Let's see if that works in real life. so here we'll test it. We'll test my philosophy in real life. So here we have a Tamiya M06. It's rear wheel drive, so that means setup is very critical, more so than front wheel drive or four wheel drive. Okay, so let's under the hood. Okay, so it's typical. So we have the front suspension, front springs. The stabilizer bars are somewhere in here, and this is the rear springs, shocks, stabilizer. And my focus today is to just focus on one part of the car, and that is the rear. And so I'm going to test two different types of springs and two different types of anti-roll bars, and that would give me 2 to the power of 2 scenarios. That means 4 different combination of setups. And so what I'm going to do is start with the red spring, which is the softest, and go one step harder, which is the yellow, neon yellow. These are the old Tamiya springs, soft. And then at the same time, I will also change my roll bar from currently silver, which is 1.2 mm, and test the thinner roll bar, which is 1 mm. Okay, so if you have a, before that, let me show you. So if you have a soft car, what will happen is when you brake, it will go like this. If you accelerate, it will go like that. If you turn, it will lean more, and it will do it, you know, relatively slowly. If your car is hard, you know, it will not move as much, it will not pitch as much, it will not roll as much. That's what happens. And so, you know, what I did was I did a test. So I did the tests. I did the baseline setup. Then I changed the springs to yellow. Took the time, recorded my lap time. Changed the roll bar from hard to softer. Took the lap time. Changed the spring back to red with a softer roll bar. Took the lap time. And then went back to the original setup and took the lap time. Why? Because I wanted to see whether the track grip, the track went faster or slower on its own. So track is sensitive to temperature, and you know, sometimes it will just get faster or slower because of the racetrack. So let's take a look at the data. What did the data show? Okay, so here's the secret data that I will share with you. Alright, so first thing here, it says M06 rear and counterclockwise direction on my track. Combo 1 means, you know, it's a combination of the spring and roll bar. So combo 1, I used the neon red spring with the 1.2 millimeter roll bar, which is the silver heavy roll bar and hard roll bar. And then combo 2 is I switched, I changed the spring but kept the roll bar the same. And combo 3, I kept the springs the same, changed the roll bars, and so on. Combo 5 is just a repeat of combo 1 because it will tell me whether or not, you know, the track was getting faster or slower. Okay. And here you have the test runs. So for each combo, I would do 5 test runs. I would take these are 5 laps. So it's, for this one, it's like 43 seconds to do 5 laps around my track from a standing start. And so here we have the fastest 5 laps, which is 43.2. And here we have the average 5 laps. Take the average. And what's important here is consistency. So we want a car that you can drive on a consistent basis. Not necessarily that gives you the fastest lap, but something that you can consistently drive fast. So here consistency is 0.24 of a second variance between runs. Okay, so it's pretty consistent with this setup. And if you look here, the stiffness, the spring was typically, I would rate it soft, and the roll bar hard. Just to give us an idea of, you know, which one is better. Is it a hard setup or a soft setup or somewhere in between? Okay, so if you look at the data, all of this, what does it tell me? The finding is this, based on also my theory, is you can, if you go too soft, your lap times will be slow. The same with going too fast, it will also be too slow. So the extremes are no good. So if you look here, the fastest lap time I recorded was the first run, and the most consistent lap time I recorded was the last run. Okay, and coincidentally, or not surprisingly, they are both the same setup. Neon red soft springs with a hard roll bar. It's the same setup. Okay, I repeated it to complete a full cycle. Yes, the track seemed to have slowed down. So if you look at the time here, 43.44 average, this is 44.44. So the track slowed by about 1 second. It's very sensitive to the temperature. I tried to run consecutively to avoid variance in the track condition, but it's still there. But it's still good to see that consistency wise, even though the track became slower, my consistency was still there. And if you'll notice, this is also more or less the second best consistency. All right, okay. So you notice it's a combination of something soft, something hard. And then what are the worst times? So the worst one is, the worst consistency I got was this one, because everything was hard. And when everything is hard, you know, when your car starts to lose grip, when the tire loses grip, it loses it very quickly, suddenly, and you will not know it. So it's hard to predict the limit of your grip. And once you exceed the limit, your car will either just spin out or just understeer so badly. That's the danger of setting it too hard. It is very reactive. It happens suddenly, very suddenly. Okay. You can see the worst came from the very hard. At the same time, the second worst came from the very soft. So extremes are not good for lap times. It must be somewhere in between, okay? And for this scenario, for this test case, for my particular track, car, driving style, and combination with the front end and so on, I am now pretty confident that I would go with this setup. And I will also know, it gives me confidence that to do all these tests, it gives me confidence in a big race when we start to panic, when things are not going our way, we try to start doing different things out of panic. This way, I do the panic ahead of time. And so now I know in a big race, I'm going to stick to my guns and stick to this setup. I'm not going to even try these 3 other variables. It's gonna be a waste of time. I've already tested and proven it, so I will stick with this. Okay, and that's how I do it. Okay, it's also bouncing the tires too much, and hence it's easier for the tire to just lose grip. Too soft, the car is probably too wallowy. Too sluggish. It doesn't follow your commands precisely. It's not reactive enough. And so I was also curious. So I wanted to really tune the car to have, keep the tire on the road on a bumpy track. And so I was thinking, it was bouncing around. So I put a cam. I put a mini cam, the SQ12, on the rear of the car. And now, so to summarize the data, what are our takeaways? Takeaway is, if it's too soft, when I put the red and red, soft sway bar, soft springs, the time went slower and I was less consistent. So I went too soft. And then when I went yellow, which is harder, and hard sway bar, my consistency was also off. Lap times was also slower. It's mainly because it was harder to drive. The car felt like it was on edge, and I was very nervous, very cautious to drive it. It was easy to spin out. And so the happy balance was somewhere in between. So it came out to my original baseline. I've been trying to improve my baseline, but it just confirms that my baseline was pretty good to begin with. So baseline is soft springs with relatively hard sway bar. This is the hardest sway bar I can get for this car. But actually it's only 1.2 mm. So compared to my touring cars, 1.2 mm is on the soft side actually. So it's not so bad. So this one gives the best lap times and the most consistent lap times. Consistency is important. That means it's not a one lap race. It's a 5-minute race, and you have to view it that way. It's your time over 5 minutes. And so I do want to look at that. Consistency is important. So this is more consistent, easy to drive for. And the takeaway there is, there are so many variables to the car. You need to approach this with some philosophy first of all, some beliefs on what you think will be a fast way of driving, of getting your car to be fast. And then do some times. You have to record your lap times. Feel is not good enough. We're not good enough to feel 1/10, 2/10 of a lap difference. On a consistent basis. So take the lap times, you might be surprised. So I take lap times all the time. The lap times do not lie. Feeling lies. How I feel. Sometimes I feel the car looks good, it's fast, but the lap time shows otherwise. And in racing, the winner is not based on who felt the fastest. It is actually who was fastest per the computer lap times. So hopefully this helps you tune your car as well. The methodology, what you have to do to take data to arrive at a conclusion at your best performing car. Do this test ahead of time. Do not do, if you go to a big race unprepared and you notice you're trying to go faster, you will panic, and panic equals defeat. Because you'll start to try things that eventually will not help. So do your test ahead of time. Go to a big race with confidence, knowing there's no point changing when I already know what will happen. So I have to think of something else, or just drive faster. Sometimes it's just a matter of driving faster. So what else? So I showed you my in-car cam. So I mount a cam here, the SQ12, so I can take a closer look, because from far away the car looks like it's just flat. It's not feeling like it's rolling or moving enough, but the cam shows otherwise. It shows the suspension is really compressing around the sweepers, it's absorbing the bumps, it's keeping the tire contact patch really good on the ground. And so it just confirms and gives me more confidence to know that this is a good setup. I've arrived, I've done my work, and it's good. So buy that small cam, put it there, see your suspension move. If your tire is lifting off the road, or the tire is not having a good contact patch, then you need to work on your suspension more. There's more room for improvement. Okay, and then also you have to treat your setup holistically. What I showed you was just doing the rear, but what you do to the rear, you know, there's also the front, and the front is connected to the rear by a chassis. So it gets more complicated. More complicated. And one way to avoid complication is to use data theory. So one way is, how do I know, depending on what springs I pick here, what springs I should use here to give the best balance? And one way is to do motion ratio of the suspension. It's technical mumbo jumbo, but I have a prior video showing how that is done, and based on taking measurements of the motion ratio front and rear, not on the track, on a workbench, just take measurements as the wheel moves, how much does the suspension compress. I found, based on that data, that I should use, technically, theoretically, a one step harder front spring. So whatever spring I use here, I will put a one step harder spring here. That's my belief. I'm not going to deviate from that too much. Now, to confirm that, I actually tried. I put a softer spring here. It made it worse. Okay, so back to the theoretical setup. It's working fine. Okay. Now, one thing you can do as well is it has to feel good in your hands. So find the center of gravity, which is here. You can press down here as it rolls through the corner, and take a look. Does this and this move at the same rate? If they do, and it feels well balanced in your hands, then that's a good sign as well. So it's moving visually. It looks like they're compressing at the same rate. That will give me a neutral balanced car, which is what I'm looking for. I want stable and fast. So there are many things you can use your hands. And that's it. That's it for today. It's a nice day. Let me now do some more tests in my garage. Okay, maybe next video will be about shock oil. Depends. Okay, so apply the tips, watch my old videos on motion ratio, building the car properly, and start taking home more of these ornaments that says champion. If you don't, be prepared to take home your participation medals. Okay, I'm just having fun, guys. So just having fun. Alright, so please, tips are helping you go faster and win more. Alright, so if you like this video, remember, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more of my nonsense.